Does everyone in Kentucky like horses? Is everyone in the eastern hillsides a hillbilly? And do they all love college basketball here? We're going to cover those things and more. So get out your 1920s Prohibition style straight bourbon whiskey. We're going to unbox the state of Kentucky. Man, this is pretty. This is the bluegrass area in Kentucky, the most well-known region in the state. But Kentucky has a lot of really pretty places in it. River gorges, mountain ranges, prairies, and farmland. It's actually one of the most ecologically diverse states in the region. Well, actually, I should stop right there. Kentucky isn't a state. It's a commonwealth. Let's get that straight. And there's a debate as to if Kentucky's a midwestern state or a southern state. Let's set the record straight on that, too. Kentucky is a southern state, pal. There's no doubt about that. But it's also kind of midwestern. Sorta. In many areas. Now, to get a really thorough understanding of the state of Kentucky and to get to know what each area is like and where the best and worst parts to live are, we should look at each various region in this commonwealth. This is Kentucky. As you can tell, it's not all hillbillies and rednecks and Bible thumpers. Kentucky's actually way more than just that. In fact, by the end of this video, you're probably going to have your mind changed on how you think about Kentucky, because there's a lot more going on than you might have thought. We'll begin our tour of Kentucky over here in eastern Kentucky. Now, I just got through saying Kentucky's not all banjo-playing barefoot hillbillies, and then I begin over in eastern Kentucky, which is a lot of banjo-playing barefoot hillbillies. Well, some of them are anyways. This is Appalachia, boy, home to lots of coal mining, or was home to lots of coal mining. As America's lessened its dependence on coal over time, these small towns tucked way back into the hollers in eastern Kentucky are shrinking. And because coal jobs are going away, this part of the state has not only the poorest counties in the state, but some of the highest poverty in the country. Eastern Kentucky kind of broadly begins anywhere east of I-75, but the really poor areas are in the hillsides of the Appalachian Mountains. You can see on this map which counties in particular have been hit hardest with poverty over the last 50 years. It's actually really sad. Nobody's moving in out here, and as people die off, the towns get even smaller. You can buy a place to live out here for anywhere between 50 grand and 200 grand, depending on how much land you want, but it's incredibly mountainous and difficult terrain to manage. There's a stereotype that folks out here marry their cousins and drink Mountain Dew and take drugs. If you look at this map, most of the meth use is on the eastern side of the state, so yes, meth is a big problem in these poorer communities. Now, in terms of the cousin lover part, well, it's a state law that you're not supposed to marry your cousin, but I'm sure it happens out here. I mean, there's a reason people say Kentucky has 4.5 million people and 6 last names. Anyways, just about everybody in this part of the state is just regular people, just really poor. Most folks here are very close-knit, and they love the locals, and they typically don't like a lot of outsiders coming in and causing trouble. Good for them. The bad side is, the poverty here goes hand in hand with bad lifestyle choices. This map shows the highest cancer death rates in the nation, and look at eastern Kentucky. A lot of that has to do with obesity and smoking rates in this part of the state, and the water's contaminated from coal mining, so they say. Coal's a big political divider in Kentucky. A lot of people still support coal, and the politicians suck up to the eastern Kentucky coal voters by blowing millions on a dying industry that continues to shrink year after year. And the people there, they don't really want to change. It's the industry that supported their families. It's hard to walk away from. And it's a sad truth. A lot of people in eastern Kentucky find their purpose and their identity in coal, no matter how much it goes down. This region's also home to a distinct school of country music that combines old folk tunes, bluegrass, and other country styles. Famous artists from eastern Kentucky include Chris Stapleton, Dwight Yoakam, and Loretta Lynn, among others. Good for you, eastern Kentucky. Besides music, moonshining still a thing out here. Moonshine is basically unaged, backyard brewed whiskey that's really strong. It's illegal, but since when did that stop anybody before? We'll talk more about whiskey varieties in this state a little later. And finally, one more stereotype we have to address. A lot of us associate Appalachia with dumb people without teeth, and that is so mean. They're not all like that in this state. I mean, as a whole, Kentucky ranks 16th in the country for quality of public schools, so that might be surprising to you. I'm telling you, Kentucky's got a lot to prove. Now, southeastern Kentucky is also very poor. Places like Hazard and Williamsburg and London and Corbin are small towns with good people, but not a lot of opportunity. But that didn't stop Colonel Sanders. North Corbin is where the first ever Kentucky Fried Chicken was. Sorta. Harlan Sanders began serving his unique style of chicken in his filling station here, and it became really popular. But the actual first franchise began in Salt Lake City, and it kind of took off from there. So KFC did start in Kentucky, but only as an idea more than anything else.
Kentucky Fried Chicken, we do chicken right.
And there's a stereotype that Kentuckians only eat KFC. That's not true. Actually, if you ask around, Chick-fil-A is more of the king of the South now, boy. Kentucky cuisine is sort of unique. They love a dish called hot browns, which is an open-faced sandwich with ham and bacon covered in Mornay sauce and cheese. They also eat burgoo, a meaty stew with vegetables. The mountain folk put squirrel and rabbit in theirs. There's also an underrated barbecue scene here, especially in the western side of the state, which utilizes a lot of mutton as opposed to beef or chicken. And there's quite a few popular drinks made famous in Kentucky too. Ale-ade and mint juleps are popular, and of course, bourbon whiskey. Which brings us to Central Kentucky. Now this is the bluegrass region of the state, possibly the most well-known region of Kentucky. You can roughly divide Central Kentucky up into the Lexington metro area, all the way down between I-65 and I-75. The middle region of the state is known for rolling hills, horse farms, and bourbon. It's actually really pretty here. The first settlers who came here said it reminded them of Ireland. The bluegrass species of grass that grows here isn't really blue per se, it's green, but when it first pops up every spring, the buds do have a blue hue to them. This part of the state's predominantly middle class, but the stretch here from Louisville to Lexington is probably the most upper class part. It's a lot of horse farms and bourbon distilleries along this stretch. A lot of people who live here commute into Lexington or Louisville for work. Frankfort's the capital. It's a nice enough place, kind of boring. Georgetown's an upper class community. So is Versailles. It looks like you'd call it Versailles, but they call it Versailles here. Lexington has 300,000 people, making it the state's second largest city. It's home to the University of Kentucky, which is beloved by just about everyone in this entire state. Most of Lexington's a nice place. It's a college town, so it's progressive. There's a smallish tech scene emerging here. The north side of Lexington is a really bad area, though. Lots of crime and poverty and rundown neighborhoods. The horse industry in the bluegrass region also attracts a lot of tourism and brings in a lot of money to the state. There's a lot of celebrities and politicians from all over the world that have houses in central Kentucky, and they've invested significant amounts of money into horse farms. Even the Sheikh of the United Arab Emirates has a farm just outside of Lexington. In case you didn't know, Lexington's the race capital of the world. They know how to breed prize race horses around here, hombre. It's not uncommon for horses bred in Lexington to fetch millions of bucks. Of course, everybody's heard of the Kentucky Derby, which pretty much shuts this place down at the end of every April. The Derby's held at Churchill Downs in Louisville. The race comes with a bunch of hype and people wear funny hats and drink fancy drinks. The whole race takes about 2 minutes and then everybody goes back to their lives again. Speaking of fancy drinks, this is a good time to talk about Kentucky bourbon. There's bourbon distilleries all over this part of the state. There's actually more bourbon barrels in this state than people. 95% of the world's bourbon comes from Kentucky. As such, the bourbon industry here also results in lots of tourism too. And there's all sorts of whiskey varieties. But bourbon is the only whiskey variety where corn is at least half of the ingredients. Evan Williams or Early Times or Kentucky Gentleman are cheap. Buffalo Trace is good but affordable. But some limited batch bourbons like Elijah Craig or Woodford Reserve can cost more than $200 a bottle. Pappy Van Winkle's is made in Frankfort, and a bottle of it can run as high as $5,000, but that's nothing compared to this bottle of Japanese whiskey that sells for $510,000. What is in this whiskey, and who can afford that? South of Lexington, all the way down to the Tennessee border, is a mix of smaller towns and countryside with lots of farms and rolling hills. There's also some nice areas down here. It's kind of spread out. Hunting's a big deal in this part of the state. As far as a Kentucky guy thinks, it's always deer season. If you're into exploring, the largest underground cave system in the world is here, located in Mammoth Caves National Park. 500,000 people go down there every year and, well, explore caves. There's eyeless fish and cave salamanders and cave shrimp down there.
And the bats!
Now, north of Lexington is where Kentucky becomes much more suburban. This whole area here, from Lexington to Covington to the northern Louisville suburbs, is called the Golden Triangle. It's a lot of middle-class suburbs, soccer moms, malls, parks, and sprawl. The kind of place where kids walk to school and neighbors have 4th of July parades in their cul-de-sacs. This is a part of the state where most of the wealth and people are. It's a big economic engine for the state. Here, right across the Ohio River from Cincinnati, is the city of Covington, A lot of people here and further from the Ohio River commute into Cincinnati every day. Or if you're close enough, you can actually walk over the bridge into Cincinnati for work. This part of the state has a very midwestern vibe. A lot of people here have a Midwest twang in their accent, and it's a lot less southern than the rest of the state. There's a lot of transplants from Indiana and Ohio who settle here for a relatively low cost of living, more amenities, and less crime. So not everybody here identifies as a true blue Kentuckian. Anyways, this whole area from Covington to Florence all the way down to Williamstown and Falmouth can be considered northern Kentucky. It's growing super fast, but still relatively affordable. You can get a great house in a nice neighborhood for under $300K. A lot of the housing communities with all the tract homes can fetch into the mid $400,000s though. What's not affordable, though, are pockets south as we get closer to the Louisville metro area. Oldham County is the wealthiest part in this entire state. This is where all the doctors and lawyers and fancy horse breeders live. Homes here fetch about $350K each on average, but many are much, much more than that. Louisville is just south of that in Jefferson County. Okay, and by the way, there's an annoyance among folks here who want you and I to say the name of their city correctly. It's not Louisville or Louisville, it's Louisville. Say it with me, Louisville. There's 770,000 people here, making this Kentucky's largest city. In fact, about a quarter of the state's whole population lives in the Louisville metro area. Louisville feels very Midwestern with a hint of Southern. It's a pretty good mix of folks: white-collar professionals, college students, hipsters, hippies, rednecks, and inner-city gangstas. This is the most diverse part of the state, for sure. The west side of Louisville is the roughest part of this whole state, outside of North Lexington. Much of the area west of the University of Louisville to the Ohio River is an area that's fallen way behind in terms of economic development and progress. If there's a shooting in Kentucky, it's likely in West Louisville. That's the main reason Louisville was just outside the top 10 when it came to the deadliest big cities in the country not too long ago. While Louisville proper only has 1/7 of the state's entire population, it has 40% of Kentucky's murders. Kentucky as a whole, though, is actually quite safe. You may not know it, but Kentucky is the 10th safest state in the country. Take Louisville out of the equation, and this state would be top 5 safest for sure, because for the most part, outside of Louisville, crimes are usually drug-related, handled by pathetic, lazy junkies. This high crime and the political clout that Louisville holds over the rest of the state are the main reasons the rest of Kentucky doesn't really care for Louisville that much. The rest of Kentucky is very much humble and welcoming and hardworking and safe. Parts of Louisville are not that. Mitch McConnell lives in Louisville, which is another reason people in Kentucky don't like this city. He's not much well-liked in the state, but according to Kentuckians, there really isn't a better option. Or at least, nobody could gain enough traction to unseat him as one of the state's senators. Politically, Louisville votes hard Democrat, but the rest of the state's very conservative, so Louisville doesn't share in the political or cultural values that much of the rest of the state does. Of course, there's a ton of fun stuff to do in Louisville. There's bars and restaurants all over and cultural things to do. Baxter Avenue and Bardstown Road both have long stretches with entertainment options. Many stay open until 4 a.m. Now as you go south out of Louisville, it gets country living really fast. Like 10 minutes south of Louisville, and you get pickup trucks and country music and Confederate flags. While eastern Kentucky would be your stereotypical hillbillies, this is where the rednecks roam. And this is where we get to our last region to discuss, western Kentucky. This part of the state also has a midwestern vibe. It's flat and relatively rural. There's lots of farmland. They get tornadoes here. And in between all the farms are decent-sized, great places to raise kids. This is a very distinctly different part of the state, kind of tucked between Indiana and Tennessee. Agriculture and livestock are the primary economic drivers of most of western Kentucky. There's a lot of tobacco grown in this part of the state. It's very religious too. In fact, this is the most religious part of this whole state. Most Kentuckians are Protestants and Baptists. And seeing as how about 2/3 of the state considers itself highly religious, Kentucky ranks as the 13th most religious of all states. There's also pockets of Mennonites and Amish in this part of the state too. And we have to briefly mention Kentucky's snake handling churches. That's where they use snakes to test your faith. If you get bit, you don't have the true spirit, pal. Notable cities in western Kentucky include Paducah, Owensboro, Murray, Elizabethtown, and Bowling Green. All are very nice. They're kind of under the radar, middle-class places with a decent amount of jobs and things to do. Paducah is right along the Ohio River. It's a nice place. They have an annual quilt show here where the population doubles from 30,000 to 60,000 people who are into quilts. If you're not into quilts, you will not be liked in Paducah. JK, you don't have to quilt to live here. Murray's a cute college town, home to Murray State University. Owensboro has 60,000 people and a cool downtown area. E-Town has 30,000 people and also has great schools. It could be considered a military town since it's just south of Fort Knox, which is an army base. Bowling Green's also a super nice place to live. It's also a college town, home to Western Kentucky University. It's one of the fastest growing cities in the country, and it's been called one of the top small towns in the country to raise a family. It has a great small town feel and great schools. There's also a Corvette factory here and a GM plant. You may not know it, but Kentucky ranks third in the nation for automobile manufacturing. There's also a big Ford plant in Louisville, and Georgetown has a Toyota plant. Kentucky is sort of becoming a mini Detroit, aren't they? One final interesting thing of note out here. There's a little peninsula here called the Kentucky Bend that's not actually connected to Kentucky anymore because the Mississippi River changed course. To get there, you have to go through Tennessee. Kentuckians are incredibly proud of their state. It's perhaps one of the most culturally distinct regions in the country. They're friendly and hospitable, religious with a strong sense of morals and values. Outside of Louisville, in its churches and potlucks and a friendly, safe atmosphere. It's still affordable here, and there's breathtaking natural beauty all around. It's a solid mix of culturally rich and modern cities and plenty of wild countryside to disappear in too. Kentuckians are actually much more wealthy and intelligent than people think. All those stereotypes of Kentucky being a poor, backward place are not true for the most part. There's large parts of the state that are up and coming, and where people have a nice middle-class lifestyle. Okay, I think we did a pretty good job of looking at Kentucky from a higher level, didn't we? Yes, we did. We learned a lot about Kentucky. We learned a lot about what Kentucky is not. Like, it's not just bourbon and horse racing and dumb people, is it? No, it's not. We could have gone on and talked about a lot of things that make Kentucky great. Like, we didn't even have time to talk about the baseball bats they make here. And we didn't talk about the complicated Civil War history in Kentucky. Nor did we have time to talk about the Hatfield and McCoys. How do we have no time to talk about them? But we have to go. The Kentucky Derby's about to start, and I bet a bunch of money on a horse that's about to finish last. Kentucky, you're so pretty all the time. Kentucky. Kentucky. Kentucky, you're so friendly all the time. Kentucky. Kentucky. You sit around all night watching basketball. If UK doesn't win, you're gonna hit the floor. You can't wait until March. That's everything you love, Kentucky. Kentucky, you make all the bourbon we can drink. You're way down in the South, but more Midwest we think. Kentucky, you race horses and they run so fast. In states like you, Kentucky. Your grass is blue, it's so blue, Kentucky. You all wear shoes, Kentucky. 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 Kentucky, you're so pretty all the time. Kentucky. Kentucky. Kentucky, you're so friendly all the time. Kentucky. Kentucky. Kentucky isn't dumb and they have all their teeth. It's growing kind of fast cause it's a place to be. Kentucky doesn't care what you and I will think. Just you be you, Kentucky. If you move to them, they'll steal your hearts. And now a special shout out to my friend Marilyn Sly, who's recovering right now from an injury. She's a big fan of this channel, and she's taking some time to heal up right now. Marilyn, you get well. We need you to get back on your feet again soon.
Yeah, Marilyn, you're one of our biggest fans. We're pulling for you. Get better soon.
Nice one, Mappy. That was really nice. Hopefully you made Marilyn smile today. Hey guys, if you learned something new about America or what it's like to live in America, great! You should think about subscribing and turning on your notifications. You can also click one of these videos or playlists for more. You can also now buy my songs on iTunes and other formats. Click the link in the description. Thanks for watching. And remember, while we all might have different views, we should all be nice to each other and try to make the U.S. a better place in a positive way.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Corner House Entertainment production.